Folks, we have breaking Nigel Richards news from the recently concluded ASCI tournament in Malaysia. Anytime Nigel faces off against arguably his top rival, Singaporean Grandmaster Hubert Wee, it makes for must-watch Scrabble action. But the decisive final round game was one of the craziest I've seen in a while. And this time, it even involves me. Let's get right into it. With Hubert one win ahead, but Nigel holding the better tiebreaker, the winner of this game will win the tournament, and with the first move, Nigel exchanges 4 tiles. Hubert answers with his best move of Fovea for 30, leaving off the E to potentially hook this word himself next move. Nigel plays the low scoring but ominous looking Oo for 9, signaling 5 strong tiles in reserve. Hubert draws a bingo rack and his top scoring option is Goetes for 74. However, after Nigel's previous move, Hubert would prefer not to open so many useful tiles for 8-letter words. In fact, Nigel holds very strong tiles and would respond to this play with Nerdiest for 86. Instead, Hubert wisely plays the much safer Egotize for 71, making 8-letter bingos extremely difficult. And as a result, Nigel has to settle for Tinders for 72. Hubert draws 2 O's and 2 Y's and plays Yows for 20 to undouble them, while Nigel uses the J and X together with Jaxie for 38. Yak for 37 could be tempting here for Hubert, setting up his B and A to play lucratively next turn with Yob and Oka, but he elects to play K for 39, perhaps expecting that Nigel is planning a follow-up overlap in that same spot after Jaxie. Instead, Nigel bingos with Acerated for 86, opening a slew of fantastic bingo lines at the bottom of the board. Holding 2 Bs, Hubert can't capitalize on that just yet and plays Kirbe for 48. The only better option would have been Kibe instead, scoring 6 more and shedding the other B in an effort to bingo as soon as possible. Nigel draws 3 L's after his bingo and plays the obscure Laurel for 28, hitting 2 double word squares. This word looks like a slew of other similarly obscure words, including its counterpart Laurel, as well as several variations of Borel, Morel, Sorel, and Worrel. So, even though his opponent is the legendary Nigel Richards, Hubert decides to challenge this word, giving Nigel an extra 5 points when it comes back as valid. He then makes his best move of Fob for 32, and after Nigel's response of Maw for 31 to go back ahead, Hubert plays Gap for 23, hoping to land the next bingo. Unfortunately, Nigel strikes first with Diuresis for 80, and while Hubert can shed his newly drawn Q productively with Chi for 46, Nigel answers immediately with a second straight bingo of Cannulate for 68. Surprisingly, he has no higher scoring or positionally superior bingos here than this, and Hubert makes by far his best play in response of Haim for a whopping 59 points to stay in range. Nigel plays Gup for 25, and things look grim for Hubert with a draw of 3 Ns. He plays Ind for 12, hoping for a great draw. This play leaves 1 tile in the bag, and not only does Nigel have some clunky tiles here, he's looking at an unseen tile pool consisting of the blank and strong bingo tiles. If the blank is the last tile in the bag, Nigel will be fine here. There are 5 other scenarios to consider though, the E, N, R, T, and U. If the E is the final tile in the bag, Hubert will play Entrust, among other things. If the N is in the bag, he'll play Curetted. If the R is in the bag, he'll play Cunettes. And if the T is in the bag, he'll play Turines. From Nigel's perspective, simply playing Coes for 30 points is enough to outrun any of these options by Hubert. However, if the U is in the bag, this would allow Hubert to play Enteritis for 74, scoring much more than any of the aforementioned options. After Coes, this would lead to a tie game. And given the tournament situation, a tie game would not be enough for Nigel. He needs a full win to overtake Hubert. Not only that, but it seems likely that on Hubert's last play of Ind, he probably didn't have the U, or else none for 13 looks like it could be a better play, scoring an additional point, leaving open the potentially useful E of Tinders and keeping the more valuable I. Nigel may be thinking that there's a higher than random chance that the U is the final tile in the bag, making enteritis an even more pressing threat. So he makes a galaxy brain play here. Although Coase wins 7 out of 8 outcomes and ties the only time it doesn't win, Nigel passes his turn instead in an attempt to win each and every outcome. This is an extremely rare gambit, but if Hubert plays any of his bingos, Nigel will easily be able to score well with his Z in a variety of ways to maintain his lead. For example, in the enteritis scenario, Nigel will simply respond with Zo for 64 to cruise to victory. Although this is a very creative idea, it's also an extreme rarity, a potentially game-losing blunder by Nigel. It's true that anytime Hubert bingos after his pass, Nigel will easily win. However, the key is that Hubert doesn't have to bingo immediately. If Hubert realizes that Coase is the best possible Z play that Nigel can have here, he could forego his bingo and just play the pedestrian-looking Tay for 2 points. Hubert drawing either the D or the N from the bag would threaten much heavier hitting overlaps of uptrend or stunner. With hooks to U and Op in very short supply, Nigel won't have any way to both block the spot and score well. He'll only have blocks like Noop available, after which Hubert will still have bingos from the Sea of Acerated that win comfortably, catching Nigel with a boatload of points. If Nigel attempts to outrun instead of block with plays like Zay and Fauvier, Hubert's bingos will still score enough to win. As it turns out, the E actually is the final tile in the bag here, which would make Tay a winning move for Hubert. Unfortunately, his time is dwindling, a common experience against the lightning-fast Nigel, and Hubert can't both generate and permute through such a complex move. He elects to take his bingo now instead, taking a 1-point lead. Nigel plays his top move of Zin for 42, after which Hubert plays his own top move, extending it to Zine for 17, collecting 20 more points from Nigel's unplayed tiles. In the end, it's not quite enough, leading to a final score of Nigel 484, Hubert 480, making Nigel Richards the winner of ASCI 2025. This would easily have been a crazy enough game on its own, but there's even more to it. Recall that earlier in the game, Hubert challenged Nigel's move of Laurel, giving him an extra 5 points. With all else being equal, Hubert could actually have won this game by 1 point had he not challenged this word. Normally, challenging Nigel Richards on any move would be considered insane. In this case, Hubert had just watched my previous Nigel video that same morning, in which Nigel inadvertently plays a phony word and then challenges off his opponent's attempt to pluralize it. And that appears to have influenced Hubert's challenge. Folks, we have officially begun the eternal Nigel Richards content loop on this channel. Nigel makes crazy Scrabble plays, I make videos about those plays, and his opponents watch those videos and generate even more Nigel content for me. Jackpot. No, seriously, I really can't fault Hubert that much here. I myself would challenge Laurel against basically anyone because of all the similar looking words that are so difficult to keep track of. Nigel is the one player that you might accept this word on faith against, but even then, Hubert is the world number 3 for a reason, and he should trust his instincts. In the end, yes, Nigel had the upper hand, but if there's anyone in the world who plays Nigel to a near standstill, it's Hubert, with the most wins against Nigel of any player in the world and a near 50% win rate against him. When these two sit down to play, I always expect that it'll be Scrabble gold. What I didn't expect is that I could somehow affect the outcome. I'm not 100% sure that's actually what happened here, but just in case, I will make sure to use my powers responsibly from now on.